Welcome to our January History Talk and Happy New Year. And we would like to welcome everyone that's joining us from online tonight. It is a bit chilly out there, so thank you for joining us this evening. Per usual, for those of you here tonight, if you haven't already, we'd love for you to sign in on our sheet over there so we can get an accurate count of attendance. You can also use that form to sign up for our newsletter. My name is Felicia, and I am the museum coordinator for the Lacey Museum. For tonight's program, we are joined by former Lacey Mayor and Council member Karen Fraser. Karen will be sharing her experiences navigating her roles in a young city, its changing form of government, and the building of City Hall and the formation of the Lacey Museum. Before we dive in, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement and some museum news. The Lacey Museum is on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. Alrighty, as usual, we'd love to see you at the museum. We are open Thursdays and Fridays, 11 to 3, and then Saturdays, 10 to 4. Come view our Smithsonian poster exhibit called Journey Stories. The exhibit explores how movement has shaped our nation with a look at American expansion and migration, from the earliest settlers and Native American displacement to the effects of transportation on modern mobility. Creativity Corner is back during the month of February to celebrate the Lunar New Year. 2024 is the year of the dragon, so join us at the Lacey Museum during our operating hours to craft your own dragon. This activity is free and for all ages. We are also selling Thurston County historical journals after the completion of tonight's program. If you are interested in those, they will be available at that back table over there. We take card or cash payments, and you can also purchase them at the museum. Okay, coming up next month, we hope you'll join us for our February History Talk with Dr. Jewel Lorenz-Dunn from the Washington State Archives. Jewel will share the basics on what you need to begin your family tree research, what the Washington State Archives has to help you in your search, and what else you can find, where else you can find vital information. Okay, so for tonight's presentation, we will hold our Q&A section at the end. We will do our best to get questions from everyone in person and our online attendees. For those online, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit those at any point during the talk. For those in person, I will be coming around with the microphone. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. We need to have those questions on the microphone so folks at home can hear them as well. Now, I would like to introduce tonight's speaker, Karen Fraser. Karen Fraser served as Lacey Mayor from January 1976 to November 1980. She was the first woman mayor of Lacey, and she was the first woman to serve on the Lacey City Council beginning in 1973, 4 years after the city was incorporated. After serving as mayor, she was elected Thurston County Commissioner, the second woman to serve in this role. She served 2 terms, 8 years, and she was next elected to the Washington State House of Representatives, where she served 2 terms, 4 years. Following this service, she was elected to the Washington State Senate for 6 terms, 24 years. She is now retired, lives in unincorporated Thurston County, and remains very active in community affairs. She currently serves on the Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College, appointed by the governor. Thank you, Karen, for joining us tonight.
How are we doing here? I don't know if you can get rid of this. There we go. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and I appreciate being invited to speak tonight, and thank you all for your interest. And great to see a number of good friends here. I appreciate that. So, as she said, I've been asked to talk about my years as mayor and city council member here in Lacey, how I came to be elected, what it was like to serve, and what was going on in Lacey during that time. I think both with the city and the community is what I've prepared. So I've got 40 minutes to talk about 40 years. So everything will be brief. Please think of a question to ask at the end. So my tenure as a Lacey elected official ended 44 years ago. So I guess it is history now. And I'm going to try to cover this in approximate chronological order, but not quite. So here goes. How did I come to be elected a member of the Lacey City Council and then Lacey Mayor? So, well, reflecting back, no surprise, it was not just one thing or a specific sequence of things that led to this, and it was definitely never planned. I never aspired to become a local government elected official until it was almost happening, and I'll be getting into that. So none of the other major activities and interests I pursued in my life prior to becoming a Lacey elected official were undertaken with this goal in mind at all. Nevertheless, it all turned out to be an invaluable background for serving. So if I make this work, the story mainly begins in December of 1966. I was graduating from the University of Washington, so that's my senior photo at the University of Washington. December 1966, I graduated from the U. December 1966, Lacey became a city. So that was a foundational year for both of us. So the context of the times in the late 60s and early 70s, quite different from now. Anybody who's in my age bracket can confirm that. Some key things that have changed: population, technology advancement, and changing attitudes toward women. So just very briefly, population, back then Lacey was 7,500 people, and the county was 75,000. Well, they've both grown by 3.5 times since then, and both the city and the county were growing faster than the state as a whole. So we were a high-growth area, still are. So, and then in terms of technology, let's see. Yeah, remember all that? Technology was really low compared to what we have now. What we have now wasn't even a glimmer of a dream. We had no cell phones, no text messages, no computers, no cable TV, no satellite TV, no GPS, no CDs, no debit cards, no barcodes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the news outlets were fewer than there are now. So there was a lot that was different. But a bigger difference than all of that were the changing attitudes toward women. Another characteristic of the times, again, this was late 60s, early 70s, I would call it the inertia of historic, restrictive, social cultural attitudes toward women. Recall that the right to vote for most women was deliberately denied until 1920, when the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was adopted. Opposition to this and to other rights of equality for women were based on widespread social cultural mores and assumptions that women's roles in life should be highly limited and that women's capabilities were always less than men's. So when I moved to this area in the late 60s, it was 47 years after the 19th Amendment was adopted. And some of these attitudes still persisted. It wasn't everywhere, but enough of them persisted in enough places I kept running into it. But fortunately for women at that time, the inertia of these attitudes and assumptions were beginning to change. There was a vigorous new wave of the women's movement beginning to flow through the land, and increasingly more and more people were becoming open to, accepting of, and encouraging of women engaging in a wider variety of pursuits, both paid and unpaid. So I both benefited from that, and I did everything I could to encourage it. But I never specifically sought to be a first at anything. I just pursued my interests, and that occasionally happened. So So I was occasionally surprised when I would run into this, and I'll give you a few examples as we go along here. So, but what I found as I pursued what I was interested in is that most often these attitudes were stereotypes, and they would vanish pretty quickly once you started working with people and you got acquainted and worked together, and then you became kind of one of the group rather than, subject to this stereotype. So a key challenge for our women then, and maybe still now in some spheres, is just getting in the door. Not always an easy challenge. But there's been a sea change of improvement, and anybody in my age bracket can give you lots of stories about that. So, let's see, on to my life. So general background before I moved here. People always like to know that. Where'd you come from? So that's my high school graduation picture. I grew up in Northeast Seattle in a non-political family. I attended Seattle Public Schools, graduated from Roosevelt High School. I first became interested in public affairs and government and politics in a high school elective that I took on current affairs. And I went to the UW, got a BA in sociology, took a lot of political science. And so my goal when I was graduating in December of 1966 was to go on to graduate school and become a professor of sociology. That was my plan, do teaching and research. My father was born in Ireland. My mother was born into a large family on a farm in Duval in eastern King County. And I have one brother who's a little younger than I am, not much, who continues to live in Seattle. Our parents divorced when we were in grade school, which was very unique back then. And that triggered a lot of unique experiences for us that resulted in our growing up with exceptionally greater independence than virtually all our contemporaries. So I moved here for employment reasons. And the way that happened was, as I was graduating in December of '66, I didn't know what I was going to do for a job in January. I was living in the dorms. I had to do something anyway. Fortunately, there was an article in the UW Daily newspaper in early December saying there were Ford Foundation legislative internships available in Olympia lasting almost a year, and they were paid. And I thought, wow, I'd love to do that. And the timing was right and so forth. So I rushed over to the political science department to apply. I was taken a little back at first because the brochure advertising the program just had a group of men sitting around a table. And I even asked, can women apply? I'm horrified now that I did that, but but I said, oh yes. And then a couple interviews later, here I was a Ford Foundation intern with the Washington State Legislature. The Ford Foundation's purpose in sponsoring these internships, oh yeah, and I was the one woman among, I think, four of us. That's Professor Hugh Bone, who was the dean of the political science department at that time. So the purpose of the Ford Foundation was to encourage Washington legislature and some other legislatures to staff up because they had hardly any staff back then. And they wanted to help legislatures become more co-equal with the executive branch. We're supposed to have separate but equal branches of government. Well, if you don't have any staff, you're hardly equal. So that's what they were trying to do. And they operated on a super low-tech basis. I'd love to give a talk about that, too. So I drove down here in my 1956 Ford, picture compliments of my brother, and it had no heat. I drove down here the Friday before the session started, didn't have any arrangements for housing. So I-5 was still under construction. It wasn't through our whole area yet. So when coming south, you got off at the north side of the Nisqually Delta, and if you can't see these pictures very well, but there's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. But anyway, I got those from archives, and that's the freeway under construction. My first weekend I spent on an overstuffed Davenport in the unfinished basement of the Olympia YWCA. I paid $1.50 a night. So continuing thanks to the Y for taking me in. So I spent the weekend checking out rentals that were advertised in a large classified ad section of the Olympian. And that's history, too, because that no longer exists. Computers have superseded all the classified ads, which has certainly made a difference for newspapers. But traditional attitudes toward women even popped up when I was going around checking out places to rent. I gradually realized that some people just didn't want to rent to a single young woman. But anyway, by the end of the weekend, I had found a place. So I started my internship with the Washington State House of Representatives, January 9, 1967. I didn't realize then what a transformational experience it would be. It actually changed my whole direction of my life. And I could have never dreamed then that I would retire 50 years to the day after that day, but I did. And I started as an intern. But interestingly, gender considerations affected where they were going to assign me to work in the House of Representatives. We were all going to be assigned to committees, and so legislative management wanted to assign me to a nice committee and with a woman chair. And so I got assigned, they gave me a really nice assignment. I was the sole staff member for the House Health and Welfare Committee. So I had like a very comprehensive experience. But and then at the last minute, the woman chair was changed to another position. So that worked out fine too. But I always wondered though, if I'm assigned to a nice committee, what am I not learning? What are the other interns learning that I'm not learning? Anyway, so after the session ended, part of the internship, it went on for most of a year. I was assigned to a large legislative interim committee as a research assistant. So I have to mention all these gender things because they don't happen anymore. So it's important that people know they used to happen all the time. So halfway through the second part of my internship as a research assistant with this interim committee, the dean of the political science department came down here and he checked in with all the interns. When he visited me, he closed the office door and he said, you won them over. What's that? What did that mean? Well, he explained that before I was assigned to this committee, the chief of staff of that committee was very opposed to having a woman in a non-clerical position working for the committee. He thought it would be disruptive. But, yeah, but apparently my work, quality of my work and my demeanor won him over, and without my ever even knowing that this was a problem. So, but the most important thing about my internship was that I became very knowledgeable about, fascinated by, and a believer in the legislative process. And this is still the case. I'm still fascinated by it, and I believe in it. Sometimes a little slow, but it gets there. But what I learned firsthand, important things, the significance of the work of elected officials, how citizens and elected officials interact, and how absolutely essential citizen advocacy is to public policy making. And I learned firsthand that no public policy decision gets made without advocates pushing for it. And all of this became embedded in me, which is important to the rest of my future. So I changed my career plans, outwent the idea of being a professor, and decided instead to pursue a career in public policy making. And my goal was to somehow serve as a staff member at the interface of citizens and either elected officials or appointed officials. So to further preparation for that, I enrolled in the Graduate School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington and got a master's degree in public administration. So, and later that year, I moved to Lacey from Olympia, and I moved into Capitol Club apartments, which maybe everybody knows. They were brand new at the time. I was thrilled with my apartment. So anyway, as I began to live here, what did I do with my time other than working? Worked in state government. So I got really involved. I took a mountaineers climbing class, and that was the beginning of the rest, a huge amount of my adulthood, hiking and climbing and backpacking, the Olympics and Cascades. And I got really, really into sailing. It was the focus of my life for a long time. At first, I actually taught sailing on Capitol Lake in 8-foot little sailboats. And then I crewed on boats that raced out on Puget Sound. And then I finally bought my own boat, which is the one you see there on the right and the bottom. So, and But of course, I ran into a few gender things there too. When I taught sailing with the Olympia Sailing Association, I had a little funny experience you can ask me about. And then after I got my own boat and started to go out on the race series with my own boat, and usually with an all-women crew, at first, there were a couple of the older men racers who were worried that I wouldn't be safe out there, that I couldn't handle, racing in this boat by myself, well, with a crew. But I came in first in my first race series, and so that took care of that. So I worked in, I worked in state government for about 10 years or more, doing legislative liaison work for state agencies. So I was very involved in the legislative process from an agency point of view. That's the kind of work I loved. So then I got really involved in the women's movement. I wanted to help put, that's do no harm but take no crap. That's a card I bought somewhere. So the one on the right, my mother designed. That's another card. So, I wanted to help put, you might say, discrimination against women, all these attitudes I was occasionally running into the rearview mirror. So I joined the National Organization for Women, the Olympia chapter, because they were focused on changing laws, which was my focus. There are all kinds of different kinds of women's groups, but they were focused on the laws. So at some point, I became the statewide coordinator for all the now chapters in the state as we lobbied for the State Equal Rights Amendment, implementation of the State Equal Rights Amendment in terms of statutes, and legislative ratification of the Federal Equal Rights Amendment. So you can say I was really involved, and I got involved in a lot of other organizations of women's advocacy in a lot of other ways. So that was a huge part of my life in the women's movement. So then you wonder, what was the sequence that got me into elective office? Well, we're finally getting here. But I didn't know I was getting here. So I joined, when I became a permanent state employee, I left out the problem becoming a permanent state employee. I'd been an intern, and they loved my work. And then they opened a position that did exactly what I did as an intern. But they didn't originally, right away, they didn't want to hire me because I was a young woman. I might get married sometime. I might have a baby sometime. And I might leave the department sometime. So that was what I was up against, and I'll bet other women have been up against that. But my intern supervisor went to bat for me, and I got the job, and I really enjoyed it. So anyway, so after I became a permanent state employee, this embedded in me, nothing happens without advocacy. I thought, well, I should join the Washington Federation of State Employees because they advocate for state employees in the legislature, and at least my dues will help them out. I kind of felt kind of a moral feeling about it. And then one day, I decided, one month, I thought, well, I'm going to go to one of their meetings and see what they're like. Well, that ended up being a real number of years of very active participation in the Washington Federation of State Employees. But the reason they're on the list up there is one day, a letter came from Thurston Regional Planning Council saying, we're looking for citizens to serve on a Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. Would you please nominate somebody? They sent that out to about 40 organizations. So the Federation nominated me. Well, I was really glad, and they ended up appointing me, and I loved serving on the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. And then, because of that work and involvement, several people recommended me to the mayor of Lacey to be appointed to the Lacey Planning Commission. Lacey Mayor Van Andel was in office then, and he was responding, I think, there was a huge push going on to get more women appointed to almost everything, because back then there were almost no women on state or local boards and commissions. So he responded to that, and he appointed me and 2 other women to 3 vacancies all at the same time on the Lacey Planning Commission. And I didn't know much about planning, but I learned a lot, and pretty soon I was vice chair. So then the next thing that happened, and I was happy, and I had no ambitions to be on the city council. I just was so pleased to be directly advisory to local elected officials. Well, then one day, it turned out there was a vacancy on the Lacey City Council. So there had never been a woman on the city council before. So I thought, by golly, there's going to be a woman that's going to apply here somehow. And so as the deadline approached, there were no women. And I called 2 women who were active in city government, had husbands and children and houses, all these things I didn't have. But they each said they were too busy. One was on the Planning Commission, one was on the Parks Board. So I gathered up my courage and I thought, okay, I guess I'll apply. I was terrified of public speaking back then. So the upshot was I came in as the runner-up, and number 2 as when they voted on it. Excuse me. There were, I think, 8 men and me were the applicants. So then I kind of thought, well, that's that. And so I went back to just kind of whatever I was doing. But then by surprise, about 2 months later, there was another vacancy. And the city council decided to use the same list rather than going out for applications again. So at that time, they did appoint me. And the vote was 5-2, not unanimous. And as I went to take my seat, one of the no votes, see how you remember things? One of the no votes sternly said to me, well, what do you want to be called? Because everybody was a council man until then. So I hadn't even thought about it. So on the spot, I said, well, councilwoman. Nowadays, I would say council member. But one positive thing that happened was I signed my oath of office that night, and somebody provided a really nice pen for me to use. So here it is. I still have it. It's a nice souvenir of those times. So let's see. So I was a city council member, and the stereotypes went away right away. And I got along really well with all the council members. I was very involved. They made me chair of 2 committees almost right away. The Budget Committee, amazing, looking back, and the General Government Committee. So I was a very involved, happy city council member. So then what happened? How did we get to that last bullet there? Let's see, where are my notes here? So the way the council manager form of government works is the council elects a mayor. Oh, I left out a piece. When the, yeah, I'll backtrack here. So anyway, in January, every 2 years, the council elects one of their members to be a mayor. And so I was laying in bed with a horrible cold about a week before all this was going to happen and wasn't thinking anything about this when one of the council members called and said, there are 3 of us who'd like to vote for you for mayor. And I hadn't campaigned or anything for it, but I wasn't so sick I couldn't count. So the 3 of them plus me makes 4, and 4 out of 7 is a majority. So I said, wow, I thought to myself, well, that would be a really great opportunity. So I said yes, and then when we proceeded to the vote the next week, it was 5-2 again. So that's how I became mayor. Yeah. So it wasn't clawing to your way to the top or anything. It was basically working with people on a satisfactory basis. So let's see, what have I got next here? Oh, that's my fancy pen. And so then that fall, so this was the fall after I was appointed to the vacancy, which was June of '73, I had to run for a 4-year term. So here's my brochure, maybe not the best photos, but that was my brochure. And that was very interesting for me to do this the first time. But the interesting thing, unusual thing about this election, also on the ballot was a change in the form of city government, to a proposal to go from being a third-class city to becoming a non-charter code city, which would give the city more legal flexibility. And the other proposal was to change the form of government from mayor-council to council manager. So I backtrack a little bit here. So the odd thing about it was in voting, you had candidates for both forms of government on the ballot at the same time. You had the proposal to change the form of government, and then you had candidates for both forms of government on the ballot at the same time. But the voters sorted through it, and it all went well. So, and then the first order of business after we became a council manager form of government was to hire a city manager. We hired Bob Williams, who had been the city manager up in Des Moines, Washington. We wanted somebody with experience. And, this is a little out of order, but when I was elected mayor on that Monday or Tuesday night, I think it was such a shock for some people to have a young woman who had been a women's rights activist be elected a mayor. It just kind of didn't fit. And I actually have this here, another one of my souvenirs. So my brother did it. He had it plasticized and framed. I think he was shocked too. So, but it was a shock for a lot of people. So the article about me takes priority over the downfall of the Speaker of the House, which is kind of interesting. So, let's see. Where am I in my notes? Where are we here? Oh, well, let's go back. Yeah, let's keep that up for a minute. So, so I became mayor, and let's see. So, so next topic. What was it like to be mayor? So, first of all, it was exceptionally busy. Mayor's duties took 20 to 25 hours per week. I see the current mayor over there. Is that what you spend?
A lot more than that.
More, okay. The city's grown a lot since then. And I was also working full-time for the state. And when you do legislative liaison work, it's often more than a 40-hour week. So, and the second thing that happened, I got over my fear of public speaking gradually through experience. But I did all the typical thing mayors do in the council manager form of government: prepare city council agendas, chair public hearings, public meetings, serve as a council's liaison with a city manager, study and deliberate on ordinances and budget proposals, encourage everybody to work cooperatively, serve as a city spokesperson, engage in civic activities, serve as the ceremonial head of the city, serve on several intergovernmental bodies, participate in association of Washington cities, and more and more and more. So I was really busy. Some of the other things I did was field citizen complaints. Back then, they were mostly about water bills. I don't know what they are these days. And I noticed as I browsed through the Lacey Leader to prepare for tonight that I would occasionally write letters to the editor if I didn't think they covered city matters properly. And I also repeatedly had to tell people I didn't have a magic wand to do exactly what they wanted right now. So, and also as mayor, I was responsible for making appointments to city boards and commissions. And of course, I was obviously very interested in trying to get half of them to be women. And they even ran an article about that once. But that was a little harder than you'd think, because when you go out and ask people to apply, only about 10% of the applicants would be women. And so I gradually, over time, as I got more life experience, realized that too often women feel like they need to know all about the job before they get it, and men are less reticent about that. So advice to everybody: you learn on the job if you're on a city board or commission. So let's see. Oh, so I did some recruiting too for boards and commissions, and I'm really pleased that 2 of my appointees later became mayors, and John Halverson, who's here tonight, and Kay Boyd, who we miss. So almost everything about being mayor is the same, whether you're a man or a woman, except back then there was really one thing that was different about being a woman. It was the fact that you were a woman, and people just kind of raised their eyebrows, or they wondered, or whatever. So it's because occasionally you'd run into these traditional attitudes. So I would sometimes be asked, for example, what's it like to be a woman mayor? I go, I never really knew how to answer that one, but I'll bet there's no man mayor who's ever been asked, what's it like to be a man mayor? Yeah. So, and then once after I'd been mayor a few years, a former local mayor, an older gentleman, expressed to me his sincere mystification, complete mystification about why a young woman would be interested in government. I mean, this is giving you an example of attitudes back then that we don't see anymore. But the most important was I was always very conscious acutely aware that I was a conspicuous role model for women, and for better or for worse. And if I did well, it would create opportunities for other women. If I made some big mistakes, then it would harm opportunities for women. So that was a stress I always lived with during those years. So anyway, after my initial election as mayor, the next 5 years were, I had to run for a second 4-year term as a city council member. And the city council reelected me mayor 2 more times. So when I was first elected, it was 5-2. The second time, it was 6-1. And the third time, it was 7-0. Yay! Both the mayor and the city council positions were and still are part-time. And the pay back then for mayor was $200 a month. And I figured that basically covered my expenses of going out to lunches and events and things like that. It was less for council members. And I'd love to give credit to all the wonderful people I served with on the city council, but time does not permit. So, but to help you keep track of where in time I served, the presidents at the time were Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter. And the governors, while I served, were Dan Evans and Dixie Lee Ray. Here I am with Dixie Lee Ray. And the other local mayors, while I served, were Lyle Watson in Olympia and Wes Barclift in Tumwater. And we worked very well together and became good friends. So, what were city priorities during those years? Well, here's a quick list. The city was much smaller than it is now. The population smaller, land area smaller, number of businesses smaller, infrastructure was just being developed, but it was growing rapidly. And as a new and growing city, we were always future-oriented, which is a little bit different than some well-established cities who it's more incremental, but we were doing so many things for the first time. So here are a few photos of what the city looked like. And if I can figure this out, whoopsie. Yeah, see, there's an outdoor theater right across the street from the South Sound Shopping Center. There's South Sound Shopping Center. Over to the right, you'll see Sears. And what it looked like some time ago. Kept kind of looking like that most of the time. Here, there used to be a horse racing track in Lacey, sort of across from the street from St. Martin's University. So that's an aerial. Let's see if you can. So there's the horse racing track. The most controversial land use decision we made while I was on the council was agreeing to that becoming housing. So now there's a historic plaque there. So, and then another picture. Here's St. Martin's back then. You can see many fewer buildings, so much less developed. So the city has so changed and developed in the last 50 years. So, so the council spent a huge part of its time on growth and development, planning and zoning. We contracted with Thurston Regional Planning Council for planning assistance, got really good help. Spent a lot of time on infrastructure, arterials and streets, traffic, water, sewer. We had a very able city engineer in Norm Kruger. And so where did the city council meet? We met in the Lacey Community Center. That makes it look a lot better than it was. It was a very run-down building, but it was the Lacey Community Center on Willow Street, and kind of fairly near Slater Kinney Road. And we all, the mayor, the city council, the city staff, and the public, they all sat at folding tables, and the public sat in folding chairs, and the city council and staff and everybody sat in folding chairs. This city started from scratch. So here's a picture of a council meeting. In the middle is Ed Davis, and the far end is Jay Meeker, and he and Gene Asselstein were kind of the two leaders in getting the change in government put on the ballot and to come about. They did really good work. So here's the first Lacey City Hall, modular building on Pacific Avenue. And then they expanded, added another modular unit. And then the police department was located in an old farmhouse adjacent to it. And here, that old police building is being moved to become the Lacey Museum, which it's still the Lacey Museum, moved about a block or so away on land very generously donated by the Lacey Women's Club. So a big deal was to build a new permanent city hall. And so we negotiated with St. Martin's College back then, to buy some property where we are now here tonight. And we had a very nice groundbreaking ceremony. And the picture of me with a spade, beside me are Bill Bush, former mayor, and Mark Brown, future mayor. So let's see, where are we? So this is what the city hall looked like when it was first built. It's a huge step up from the modular building we'd had, and now it's been added onto multiple times. And we had a wonderful ribbon cutting ceremony, and helping me cut the ribbon was the famous Lenny Wilkins, the manager, coach of the Seattle Supersonics basketball team. They were practicing at St. Martin's at the time, so we invited him to come over, and he graciously agreed. So that's a really nice memory. And then we were always working on services of the city. The city contracted with Lacey Fire District 3, and before Lacey became a city, it was unincorporated. Fire District 3 served it, and then when we became a city, that was excluded from the district, so we just contracted with them, and it's been a very successful relationship. And since it's moved on from them, the city has now annexed to Fire District 3. The fire department built a main fire station on land where the modular city hall was, and now it's a private high school. And during my tenure, the emergency 911 communications system began. So there was a communications board created. That was all located at the courthouse, and I served on that board. The city library was in rented space in a small shopping center on Lacey Boulevard. So here's the grand opening of the museum. You might recognize there's Ken Balsley, and there's me, and looks like Miss Thurston County. I'm not sure who the others are, but anyway, it was a very nice opening, and it's a great museum. If you haven't been there, you should go. They do a very nice job. So what was going on with the city, around town? So I've talked mostly about government, but there's a lot going on around town, and these are just little kind of pictures captioning a lot what's going on. We had the Lacey Leader newspaper. The radio station that dominated the news and kept kind of the glue of the city was radio station KGY 1240. And I have a picture of Dick Poust and Bob McLeod up there, who kept the community informed. And I need to add Dick Nichols to that, who was a hero of running local sports teams on the radio. And actually, KGY is the oldest radio station in the state, and it started at St. Martin's. There was only one high school at the time, North Thurston. There was a St. Placid's Catholic Girls High School near College Street and Martin Way, no longer there. I-5 was finished. We were all grateful for that. The Panorama retirement community was called Panorama City at the time. It was much smaller and still fairly new. There was an annual Lacey Music, Arts, and Dance Festival, MAD Festival, held at St. Martin's. Chamber of Commerce was very active, and during my tenure, they elected their first woman president of the chamber, another sign of the times. It was a big deal. She was excellent, yeah. Some volunteers built the Lacey Flag Plaza, which was up near I-5, 1978. Lot sewage treatment plant got started. St. Martin's, as I mentioned, was called the St. Martin's College back then, but during my tenure and since, they've done so much infrastructure upgrading and improvement. It's really fabulous. Lacey Post Office was a small brick building still on Slater-Kinney Road, and it's been moved. South Sound Shopping Center was still new, and it had lots of stores, not just a few big ones. And it was sort of a civic center for the city because it was an indoor shopping center. And there were new banks and retail stores going in all the time. So, but it wasn't only the infrastructure. There's a lot of social services going on. There were constantly new houses, neighborhoods, organizations, et cetera. And so we were always building community relationships between people. So I thought this was kind of a cute picture with the brownies coming in. There was an Institute of Cultural Affairs. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of them, but they're a large nonprofit organization, not sure where they're headquartered, but they decided to kind of help build community here, and so they sent a volunteer, I don't know if he was paid or volunteer, to come and help build community relationships, and his name was Reverend Berkey, and he was here for a year or so. So, let's see. These are out of order. So my non-elected life, I had a life too. So I purchased a condo in Lacey. I was finally a homeowner. Then I got married. So where is that picture? There it is. Yeah, I got married to Tim Malone. Best years of my life. And Lacey Leader thought that was really interesting and wrote all about it. And then the kimono. Oh, yeah, the kimono one. Oh, God, I'm not doing very well here. I don't do this very often. Tim and I became very active in the Olympia, Yashiro, now Kato Sister City Association. I'm still very active in that. And we had a great life together. Then I miss him every day. And I remained active in the women's movement while I was mayor and city council member. And this is a pin from the International Women's Year conference in Ellensburg, and I was heavily involved in that, and that would take a whole talk almost by itself. Ended up in federal court, but I won. And so, where are we? Yeah, well, it was quite the conference. And Lacey served as the address for a lot of the post-conference important mailing that we needed to do to settle some disputes. So, and I was recognized by some local groups here. And so anyway, my Lacey city council and mayor years became the foundation of really the rest of my life. So after I left the Lacey City Council, I became Thurston County Commissioner for 2 terms. And I was, as she mentioned earlier, I was the second woman county commissioner here. I became the first woman president of the Washington State Association of Counties. And then I was elected to the state legislature, 2 terms, 4 years to the House, and then later to the Senate, and served 24 years there. So I know a lot about the Senate. So now I'm retired, and my major, I'm active in a lot of community affairs, and some of you are here from things we work together on. But probably my number one activity is I'm chairing the Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College. And I'm pleased to say the college is doing very well. Enrollments are going up, funding is going up, everything's going quite well out there. So I'm pleased to tell you that, and it's a pleasure and privilege to serve on the board. So with that, that's 40 years in 40 minutes.
Alrighty, folks, we are going to move into the Q&A section of our talk. So as a reminder, folks at home, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type those questions in. And then folks in person, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone around so that you can ask those questions.
While you were so busy as a mayor, what was the city manager doing?
Oh, he was really busy, yeah. Yeah, the city manager, well, you have to distinguish between the council and the manager. So the city manager is the legal manager of the city. And so the city manager is responsible, for the police department, the planning department, the parks department, accounting and everything. So, and then the city council decides the policies. Yeah, we give the council gives the manager direction, and then the manager says yes. He should, anyway, yeah.
So at the time when you're deciding between becoming a strong mayor or a council manager form of government, what were the big arguments at the time of why we should switch?
You know, I came along, I really hear the question. I came along when that train was quite a ways down the track. So I was appointed in June, and that was on the ballot in November. So a lot of the prep work had been done for that. But I think probably the biggest considerations were the quality of management for the city. It's hard to find a person who embodies everything you need. Somebody who can wants to be elected, can get elected, and can be responsible legally and financially for all the services of the city. So, and at that point, there had been, mayors had resigned. So we went through a series of short-term mayors. So I think that added to the concern.
Okay, somebody online said, thank you for your commitment to equity, and you had time to learn Spanish. What do you consider to be the city's most exciting, inspirational moment for Lacey's success when you were mayor?
The most inspirational when I was mayor, well, certainly getting the city hall, a brand new city hall, and moving out of a modular building and moving out of a falling down community center for our meetings. That was very inspirational and uplifting and for everybody. I'll put that down for now. I'll think about it some more.
During those years, there were several attempts at a county charter form of government, and I wondered if what your perspective would be, having had that experience as mayor of one of those pieces.
Well, actually, I supported both efforts to have a county charter. There were two types. One type, then the freeholders were elected to write these, and then they went on the ballot. So I think maybe the first one was I can't remember the sequence, but one was just to keep the county doing county services, but give them the flexibility to change if they wish. A lot of the structure of county government is in our state constitution, and it prescribes you shall do this and this and this. You'll have certain elected officials. A lot of the department heads in county government are elected officials. So if you had a county charter, you could examine each of those and maybe make them appointed. You know, you might want to appoint the coroner. That would be one that people talk about more often. So that was a proposed county charter, and I supported that. And then there was a city-county proposed charter where you could do the same thing, but merge departments of the city and the county if you wish, but they both failed.
Okay, we have another one online from Leslie Goldstein, and she says, were you ever asked to serve coffee? P.S. I loved serving as staff when you were a senator.
Leslie is one of the great people around here. I don't think so. No, I haven't reflected back on that, but I don't think so, no.
Hi, Karen. I just didn't hear the name of the very important person to me and others, the mayor who first appointed you. And then the question is, they're involved in like 22 intergovernmental governing bodies now between all the jurisdictions. So did that intergovernmental work begin in your term?
Okay, I was appointed, maybe I went over it a little too fast, Mayor Albert Van Andel was the mayor who appointed me to the Lacey Planning Commission. And then I think he might have, I'd have to research this, or probably the museum knows, but then there were a couple other short-term mayors, and I think that's part of what led to the thought, well, we need to hire a professional city manager. So your second question was intergovernmental boards and commissions. There were a lot of them back then, and they were kind of growing. What a lot of people don't realize is local government around here is heavily dependent on intergovernmental relations. Instead of each city and the county all doing the same thing separately, for a lot of functions, they combine and they put representatives of each jurisdiction on them. Sometimes there are citizens added, and that is a very important part of government. And actually, that's one of the reasons local government works so well around here, is we have so many intergovernmental entities. So when we created the 911 system board, it has a different communications board, that would have been a new one when I served. And so it's interesting to realize we take 911 for granted, but at one time it was new. And then one was split apart while I was mayor. I was chairing the 2-county Board of Health. We had a joint Thurston County, Mason County Board of Health. And it had mayors on it. And so I was chairing it. And one day, the Thurston County Commissioners came in and said, we're withdrawing. I mean, just abruptly, almost like that. So no advance notice, just they came in and did it. So then I got all involved in the separation and reorganization of that. So they come and go, but mostly they come, and they are a very important part of local government around here, and they work very well on the whole, yeah.
Okay. What advice would you have for a young woman who wants to take a step toward getting involved in city government?
Well, I always tell everybody who's interested, I'd say, first of all, follow your interests. And I'd say if you want to get involved in city government, first of all, volunteer for something or ask to be appointed to a board or commission that interests you.
Karen, you have been great to work with. For the few things that I had the chance to do it with you, what were the keys to you being successful all these years, right from college? Could you share some thoughts?
Well, I mean, you're asking me to talk about myself, which is kind of hard. Well, I would say being diligent in your responsibilities, working hard, working well with others, exceptionally important, having respect and appreciation for others, finding a way to like and appreciate everybody, and believe in democracy. And so when you believe in democracy, you believe in the importance of the people who come and talk to you and want things. And then you need to work hard to figure out how to do them. And then you have disappointments, but you need to always move on from them. You agree and you disagree with your colleagues from time to time. So work hard, be accurate, be a person of your word. That's very important. Trust is a major ingredient in governmental affairs, yeah.
What did you like best about public service?
Oh, I probably like two things. One, I love working with all the people, and I love working within a system to make things happen.
All right.
Question over here.
Oh, great. Where was it? Question.
Thank you, Senator, for being here tonight. What did you like least about it?
Oh, well, are you talking about Lacey, or are you talking about public service as a whole?
Public service as a whole.
Well, occasionally you have to make a decision that is simply awful. And so what makes a decision awful? Well, it could be that half the public wants it one way, half wants it the other way. Another might be ends versus means. You don't have the resources to do what should be done. So those are some of the things that can be awful. And I'm not sure I experienced any really, well, no, I did. When I was a county commissioner, some of the land use decisions were simply awful because they were so contentious. And then when I was in the legislature, some of the budget decisions reached that point too. And the maybe revenue decisions, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Karen, for joining us tonight. This has been a great program and a lot of great questions, everyone. So thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you, Karen, and thanks for folks joining at home. That will conclude our program, and we will see you next month.